If you're new to Destiny 2 or want to know what I think of the game overall in terms of graphics, sound and base gameplay, then be sure to check out my previous Destiny 2 reviews from 2018 and 2019, plus several season reviews that go through how the game has changed for the better and worse since its 2017 release. Now that Activision is out of the picture and Bungie has had some decent time on their own for us to get a gauge of where D2 is heading this year and whether it's worth sticking with or even picking up for those who haven't played before, or perhaps only played a small amount. So I'll preface this review by saying that I've been playing less and less of Destiny 2 as the weeks go by, and especially since Season of Dawn has been made available. The gunplay is still excellent as it has always been, but the path I see the game going down over the last 6 months has made me initially feel excited and looking forward to the future, to now feeling that instead of the game evolving over time like Bungie has said it's wanted it to be, and everything having true meaning, it's seeming to only evolve over the course of a season until the next one starts. This is absolutely one of my main concerns about the game, and it was something that I really enjoyed back in the Season of Opulence with the activity of the Menagerie. The 6-player match-made activity, which sees players take down enemies and bosses, as it incorporated some extra mechanics during some rounds, and where players could choose the rewards given at the end by manipulating the chalice with the ruins required. It was basically a horde mode during each of the rounds or areas, and it was fun. But then when the Season of Undying released, we had the Vex Offensive, which was similar to the Menagerie. It wasn't as interesting in my opinion, but it was quicker to get through and players did receive some good rewards. But the problem was it was just too similar to how the previous season was, introducing a new 6-player match-made event, which the season would mostly center around. But then the Season of Undying ends and the Season of Dawn starts, and yeah, that's right, a new 6-player match-made activity is introduced in that of the Sundial. This time involving Osiris, and he's set on Mercury. And this is why my hours in Destiny 2 have been steadily declining towards the end of the Season of Undying, and why I almost find it completely uninteresting to play the Sundial activity. There is nothing inherently wrong with it. It looks beautiful, of course, great gunplay tearing through all of the enemies during each section of it, but we've basically been doing the same thing during each of the last 3 seasons. For anybody who wants to think about the future of Destiny 2 logically, then we can look to the past, especially the last year, and it can give us a good idea of what the future holds. If each season for the entirety of this year is going to revolve around a single event, then they each need to be entirely different to each other, or it's going to grow very stale very quickly. But I believe Bungie are starting to hit a wall when it comes to what actual events they can offer within this type of game that we haven't seen before, or with elements we haven't seen before. Now this isn't me simply complaining about the game, because the Menagerie, Vex Offensive and the Sundial themselves are good activities, and the fact they are match-made 6-player events is also a good thing. But it doesn't matter how good they are in isolation, as over the weeks and months, doing these activities, which are so similar, is going to become boring, and each player will hit that point just at different times. And that brings me to another area which I seriously hope Bungie focus on and come up with a fix for it, and that's in making all of, or at least a majority of content be relevant at all times. This is mainly for those players such as myself who have invested hundreds, if not thousands of hours into the game. For new players, Destiny 2 has a ton of content, and you'll probably find yourself overwhelmed with how many things there are to do and how much there is to learn. This is nothing new for a game of this type, which has been around for years though, and it will take time to understand and learn its various parts. But for those who have played a lot, such as myself, there are times I load up the game, do some activities or strikes, but then switch it off not too long after, as I feel like what I'm doing isn't really progressing my character at all. And I've done it so many times that fatigue is starting to set in, and this is where I'm going to bring up bounties. In my opinion, bounties need a complete overhaul to how they operate and what we do. After years of doing these both daily and weekly, there are times over the last year, and especially the last few months, where I don't bother picking them up anymore, as I couldn't be bothered getting a certain amount of sniper kills or killing a certain number of strike bosses, and this extends to the weeklies as well, such as completing 5 runs through the Nightfall. In 2020, this is simply busy work, and the rewards for completing them aren't enough for myself anymore to reluctantly do them. In a previous review, I mentioned that being able to acquire extra bounties was a good thing for those who wanted them, but even back then, I still wasn't going to get them, and they were just telling me to do the same things over and over again. But this extends to other parts of the game as well, whereby I've done the activities so many times and the rewards for doing them simply aren't there. Needing to complete planetary patrols or going into lost sectors has just become tedious, and that's when they are a part of a bounty, let alone actually doing them in open play. When opening the map, there are several planets to visit, but besides the flashpoint and anything linked to rewards, there really isn't much reason to go to many locations unless there is an item or quest related to it, and then that's it. So let's discuss how quests and story are these days. In my last review, I made mention how I felt in my specific situation and what I personally wanted from the game. I want Bungie to put a heavy focus on Destiny's story and quests. The universe of Destiny is rich in lore, and I want as much of that in the game where we get to play through it, meet new characters, and who become part of the world much more than simply dishing out uninteresting bounties and standing in the same spot. Bungie wanting to expand the story and have seasons impact each other is a step in the right direction, but we really haven't seen much of this yet. But releasing new quests which expands the backstory of certain characters or items on a weekly basis is what we need even more. Logging in to play through the new story content is what I want, not to just complete bounties. Of course, this type of content is much harder and more time consuming to create, but I feel it needs to become a main priority. If it does, then it's more tolerable if we do receive 6-player activities which are similar to each other from season to season, as they become a diversion to the main part of the game. We have weapon quests which give a specific reward at the end of it, and we also have some quests which involve more puzzle elements, which is a welcome addition. But this will appeal to the more hardcore player, which is fine, as opposed to the more casual Destiny fan, but we need even more, and I say that as a more hardcore player whose hours in the game have gone down. But even the story quests themselves need a different structure and an increase in the writing associated with them. Destiny has had this issue quite a few times over the years, but in 2020, it's time to move on from mundane objectives, similar to what we already do in bounties when undertaking these quests. Killing a certain number of enemies, collecting a certain amount of materials from them, these types of quests and activities need to stop and be replaced by proper, engrossing, multi-step quests with engaging storytelling and which don't rely on artificially lengthening them with these outdated and uninteresting objectives, regardless of how good the gunplay is. Destiny 2 is filled with fantastic content, which has been forgotten about it seems, and which is really not worth doing at all. Sure, you'll get some powerful rewards and it may contribute to helping you level up eventually, but once again, how many times can we run the same content? Take the strikes for example, which I've admitted to being one of my favourite parts of Destiny as a whole franchise, but they have been severely lacking in D2 for so long. The strikes introduced in the Shadowkeep expansion were excellent, but there isn't any real incentives to want to go and play these all the time. Yes, they have modifiers, but where is the strike specific loot? How about mixing them up even more so they aren't exactly the same all the time? Put more secrets within them, make them more difficult, make us use specific weapons, not weapon type, but a specific weapon. Have it rotate each week. Some players may have this weapon, others may not. For those who do, they get to run a completely different version of a particular strike with a unique reward which gives new story details we haven't seen yet. For those who don't have the weapon, more ways to gain it can be introduced, so there is more of a chance to be able to access the strike. More ways to get the weapon across more planets, which helps with making older content more meaningful. Plus we get to work towards really tangible rewards. A new weapon, gaining access to new strikes, new story details, plus more rewards. This is just one example, which leads me to my next point. There needs to be more ways for players to earn the rewards they want by doing the activities they enjoy doing the most. Now, I'm not saying that some certain weapons or armor can't be tied specifically to a raid, for example, as with the amount of time and effort which goes into creating those and playing them, especially at release, it makes them even more special by having items only obtainable from them. But what I'm talking about basically boils down to the PvE versus PvP debate. Some, such as myself, enjoy both modes for different reasons. Others very much prefer PvE and others much prefer PvP. I believe that Destiny to succeed over the long term such as it has, it needs both. As I touched on earlier, Bungie can never really create as much PvE content that would satisfy hardcore players as they devour everything very quickly, but the PvP helps the game in the content droughts and when the seasons are in their final weeks and players tend to drop off in anticipation of new content and activities. Some players can play PvE for hours upon hours running the same content, which I can't, such as bounties. Others can play match after match of PvP for hours, which I can no longer do. but each are an important part of and contributes to the success of Destiny. Many PvE players loathe having to enter the Iron Banner, only to be destroyed repeatedly by other players, sucking any fun from the mode, whilst many PvP players would rather just play more matches than head into the Strike playlist, for example, for some powerful rewards. So then what activities would these players each do in 2020? Well, outside of the new seasonal content, I don't think there's all that much for Destiny veterans apart from chasing things such as emblems or ranks. Trying to hit maximum power level isn't needed, as increasing the level will come very easily the next season. Plus, the seasonal artifact can increase the power level further. Check out my Shadowkeep review for what the artifact is and how it works. But again, another one returns this season, which makes me ask, is each new season outside of the major content drops going to be primarily focused around a single activity with yet another artifact to level up? Now, I'm sure there are Destiny players watching this that are thinking I'm complaining about everything to do with the game, but with the amount of hours I've put into it and will continue to do, I want the best for the game and the franchise, and this also goes for the Crucible side of the game, which isn't in the best place at the moment. It always had its problems, and it must be an absolute nightmare for Bungie to try and balance everything from weapons, supers and armor, which caters for both the PvE and PvP sides of the game. Is it time for Bungie to completely separate the modes from each other, whereby the weapons, armor and supers act differently within each mode, and balancing can be targeted towards each individually? This would require more work with extra time being devoted, probably between two separate teams. But if that's something that won't be happening, then once again something needs to be done in regards to the skill-based matchmaking. Having matches against others who are of a similar skill level is how it should be, and when a new season starts, and especially when a major content drop happens, this works very well. The problem arises when the season goes on and players begin to drop off and the pool of players becomes smaller. When this happens, wait times become longer and players are matched against players who are geographically too far away from them, and so connections suffer, lag is introduced, and the number of quality matches is reduced. This isn't a problem only with Destiny, but it is there. The games often have tweaks when it comes to weapons, armor and supers, and this will continue when you have a game as complicated as Destiny. But accepting it isn't enough, and measures need to be implemented in trying to eradicate or at least greatly reduce the issues. Even with saying that, I still believe that the PvP is an important part of Destiny going forward, and one reason why I still play. And I just want to play within this incredible world and universe that Bungie has created, but as mostly a solo player, heading into much of PvE is just uninteresting at the moment. Bounties, patrols, lost sectors, strikes, I've just been doing them for so long. Now mostly everything I've been saying is of course just my opinion and where I'm at with the game as a long-term player. If you're a new player, then the game offers an absolutely huge amount of things for you to do and discover. When I mention that I'm overrunning strikes, I'm saying that from the perspective that I've done each of them dozens and dozens of times. Missions have been run, planets and locations have been explored, and I'm wanting D2 to really enter a new era of storytelling and evolving this world in a more meaningful way. Destiny 2 has had some great story content over the years, but one of my main criticisms has been that not much actually gets resolved to a satisfactory point. If Bungie can tell ongoing storylines that go from season to season, but also have a sufficient conclusion at the end of each, then this will go a long way to offering what I think many players are after. Destiny 2 in 2020 is still a great game to invest many hours into, and which will provide new players with a lot of content to get wrapped up in. From doing the strikes the first few times, activating heroic public events, discovering a lost sector, absorbing the rich lore or racking up some kills in PvP, it's all fantastic and exciting and worthy of a player's time, especially new players and those who are playing the game for free. But as the hours rack up and the content is no longer new or surprising, you come to the conclusion that the game needs far more missions, which give proper storytelling and character development, a difficult task in a games as a service game. For me, I'll keep logging in every now and again to keep playing some of the fantastic gameplay and when new quests arrive. But for me to commit the hours as I once did, Destiny 2 will need to evolve the world with its ongoing storytelling, as Bungie has mentioned. I just hope it happens sooner rather than later.